Okay, good morning. Time now 8 a.m. On the Friday, March 31st, 2023 in Tokyo time. Welcome back to another edition of the World Bank Tokyo online morning seminar. My name is Koichi Omori. I am Senior External Affairs Officer of the World Bank based in Tokyo. We organize a series of the online seminars to introduce the latest report put together by the World Bank team, featuring the authors, actually the World Bank economist or specialist of those report, presents the main point of the report for the viewers in Japan. This morning, we are pleased to feature the Women, Business and the Law 2023 edition, which was released on March the 2nd, earlier this month. We have already established a good tradition of featuring the key periodical report. The Women, Business and the Law report is one of them. But also, this seminar is important because we are now running Japanese national recruitment programs under the donor-funded staffing programs initiative. We have 14 positions currently advertised and posted on our website. This year, we have the economist mid-career positions from the Women, Business and the Law team. TOR for this position also is posted on our website. So this seminar is not only for us to feature the latest edition of the Women, Business and the Law report, but also for those of you who are interested in applying for this economist position. This is a team that you are going to be part of, you are going to be working for, and these are the colleagues that you are going to be working together once you are involved in this project. So let me introduce two speakers that we have connected from Washington, D.C. this morning. We have Victoria Kaitena, who is an analyst in the Women, Business and the Law project. She actually spoke at the last year version of the same seminar, but we have a pleasure of having her back in the seminar. Victoria, good morning, good evening to you.
Good morning, everyone.
Great, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes. Then we. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead if you would like to introduce Liang, and then I can take over.
Yeah, actually, I would like to introduce also Lian Chen, who is also the analyst at the Women, Business and the Law project. She's joining the presentation today. Lian, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you very much. So next 40 minutes, we are going to listen to both Victoria and Lian to share the main point of the Women, Business and the Law 2023 editions. After their presentation, I'll read the question that we received from you already in advance. But if you did not have opportunities to send your question, please do so by sending your question using the online form posted on the announcement page of this seminar, or you can simply post your question on the chat section of the YouTube screen. I'll read your question after their presentation, asking two speakers to respond. So with that, I would like to formally invite Victoria and Lian to come in to start the presentation. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and thank you so much for having us today. It's really a pleasure for us to be here this morning and to discuss the work we're doing and present to you the latest findings of the Women, Business and the Law 2023 report with a focus on Japan and the OECD high-income region. During our presentation today, we will provide a brief overview of our project, followed by our global and regional findings, focusing on the OECD high-income region, a deep dive of Japan's performance, a summary of Japan's legal reforms over the past 5 decades, as well as women, business and the law, exploration of new research areas. We will also highlight how women, business and the law data can be used to drive reform that advances women's economic empowerment. Let's begin with background of our research. Let me start with the story of Alma Gul. When she was 27, she decided to change her life and pursue her passion. She quit her job and went to college to be an auto mechanic. In 2019, Almagul was hired as a truck driver in Kazakhstan, but was quickly fired because women were prohibited from such jobs. Over 200 jobs in Kazakhstan were classified as prohibited for women until October 2021. Almagul eventually found another job as a truck driver, but in a different country where it was legal for her to work. On October 12, 2021, the president of Kazakhstan signed amendments repealing the ban, but 65 economies still prohibit women from working in the same industries as men. 15 economies still have restrictions on women working in transportation. And this is just one example of how restrictions on women's employment can limit their ability to pursue their careers, achieve their full potential, and contribute to their economies and communities. Legal gender equality is critical to empowering women and girls. Over more than 1 decade, our team has been investigating one question. How do laws affect a woman's working life? Since then, we have been dedicated to improving our products and delivering publications that are evidence-based, data-driven, and that can also be useful to World Bank operational teams and also external organizations working towards advancing gender equality. Women Business and Law 2023 report is the 9th in a series and provides a comprehensive assessment of global progress toward gender equality in the law over the past 53 years. Our research covers 190 economies, and we rely on over 10,000 legal experts around the world to help us collect this data and inform our analysis. We know that countries cannot move forward if half of their citizens are held back. If a country's laws prevent women from fully participating in the economy, we cannot expect the economy to grow to its full potential. Yet, all over the world, women must navigate discriminatory laws at different points in their lives and careers, limiting their economic security and career potential. That's why at Women Business and the Law, we set out to identify where exactly laws prevent women from becoming employees and entrepreneurs. So what exactly does Women Business and the Law measure? The goal is to track how the law affects women's access to economic opportunities. The 8 indicators that you can see on the slide are from mobility to pension, follow how the law impacts a woman at different stages of her working life. Whether a 25-year-old starting her first job, a mother balancing work with caring for her children, or a woman preparing for retirement, the 8 indicators show the ways in which laws affect women throughout their working lives. The Women Business and the Law Index provides indicator and economy level scores with 100 representing the highest possible score. Why does gender equality matter for women's economic empowerment? Our research finds that equal treatment of women under the law is associated with a larger number of women entering and remaining in the labor force and rising to managerial positions. It generates higher wages for women and facilitates more women owning a business. Reforming in ways that incentivize women to enter the labor force will level the playing field and make the economy more dynamic, resilient, and strong in the face of shocks. So since the law is so important for women economic empowerment, where do we stand today? What are some of the interesting findings of our 2023 report? First, let's explore the global and regional findings together. This year, we found that globally, on average, women have just about 3/4 of the legal rights of men. Precisely, the global average score is 77.1 out of 100. This means that 2.4 billion women globally do not have equal economic opportunity as men. These legal barriers limit women's ability to make the right choices, which can lead to better economic outcomes. For example, the lack of financing restricts women's opportunities to start or expand their businesses, limiting them to small informal roles. In this year's Women Businesses Law 2023 Index, we now have 14 economies that score 100, all from high-income economies. The Netherlands joined the group this year. The other economies include Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, France, Luxembourg, Latvia, Iceland, Germany, Canada, Ireland, Portugal, Greece, and Spain. But that means that in 176 economies, there is opportunity to reform legal barriers and enhance women's economic opportunities. And in fact, the variation in Women's Business Law Index score across and within regions shows that there is still a lot of work left to be done to advance the gender equality agenda. In this chart, one blue line represents one economy, and the blue circle is the regional average score. We can see that the equality of economic opportunity for women is highest in OECD high-income economies. On the upper right corner of the graph, where the average score on the Women Business and the Law Index is 95.3, and lowest in the Middle East and North Africa region, where the average score is 53.2. When it comes to the variation within regions, the largest gap is in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as the Sub-Saharan Africa regions. Every region has examples of economies implementing good practice laws and those with room to improve. Countries can look to their neighbors for examples when seeking to implement reforms or inspire others to do so. While the progress has been made, the pace of reforms must be accelerated. We found that 18 economies introduced a total of 34 reforms toward gender equality. The good news is that all regions enacted reforms. Most reforms happened in Sub-Saharan Africa, with 7 economies enacting 18 positive legal changes. As you can see from the left 3 bars, most reforms focused on mandating equal pay, increased paid leave for parents and fathers, and removing restrictions on women's work. And this is the lowest number of reforms in 20 years. A young woman starting to work today wouldn't see equal rights in her working life. Thanks to reforms in Sub-Saharan Africa, this year the pattern among regions has changed for the first time since 2004. This year, Sub-Saharan Africa surpassed the average score of East Asia and Pacific. OECD high-income economies continue to have the highest average scores, and the region that advanced the most due to reform efforts is the Middle East and North Africa, which is actually the lowest scoring region. Let's explore some findings within OECD high income and see how Japan performed. Of the 34 positive legal reforms toward gender equality during the past year, only one occurred in the OECD high income region, as we can see in the green section on the graph. In the Women, Business and the Law 2023 cycle, the Netherlands introduced paid parental leave. Each parent is now entitled to 9 weeks of paid parental leave, equivalent to 63 calendar days at 70% of the employee's daily wage. And with this reform, the country now scores 100 in the Women, Business and Law Index. Let's examine trends across economies in the OECD high income region. The pay and pension indicators, they are represented by the yellow bars on the graph, score lowest in the region, meaning that there is the greatest opportunity for legal reform. The pay indicator assesses laws and regulations affecting occupational segregation and the gender wage gap. Our research in the area of pay finds that 6 out of 34 economies in the OECD high income region do not mandate equal remuneration for work of equal value. We also find that in 8 economies, a woman cannot work in an industrial job in the same way as a man. The pension indicator examines laws affecting the size of a woman's pension. In the area of pension, we find that in 8 economies, the age at which men and women can retire with full pension benefits is different, and that periods of absence due to childcare are not accounted for in pension benefits. The overall score for Japan is 78.8 out of 100, the same as for 4 other economies around the world. They are Azerbaijan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Philippines, and Tajikistan. The overall score for Japan is higher than the Women, Business and the Law Index global average of 77.1, but lower than the high-income OECD economies average of 95.3. And we will take a closer look at each area measured by Women, Business and the Law to understand where the strengths and opportunities for improvement are. And here you can see how the country compares with other countries within the high-income OECD group, as well as the world. So to give you the big picture on where Japan stands within the Women, Business and the Law Index, when it comes to constraints on freedom of movement, laws affecting women's work after having children, gender differences in property and inheritance, and laws affecting the size of a woman's pension, men and women are on equal legal standing. Japan gets a perfect score of 100, that is in the indicators mobility, parenthood, assets, and pension. Although when it comes to laws affecting a woman's decision to work, laws affecting women's pay, constraints related to marriage, and constraints on women on starting and running a business, Japan scores lower than the global average. Let's dive into each of the indicators to understand what each measures and which gaps persist. The mobility indicator measures restrictions to women's freedom of movement and agency, both within and outside the household. Removing restrictions on women's mobility is important to enable women to join the labor force and open their own businesses. Japan scores 100 in the mobility indicator. Although Japan performs well in this indicator, we would like to highlight that legal gaps in this area still persist globally. For example, in 34 countries, women cannot choose where to live in the same way as men. Let me give you an example. In Senegal's family code, it reads that the choice of the marital home belongs to the husband. The woman is required to live there with him. From this case, we hope that we can raise awareness that the work is far from being done globally. Let's move on to the workplace indicator, where Japan scores 50. The workplace indicator analyzes laws affecting women's decision to enter the labor market, including their legal capacity and ability to work, as well as protections in the workplace against discrimination and sexual harassment. Studies show that sexual harassment not only reduces employees' productivity, leading to a high employee turnover, but also is associated with a decrease in companies' returns and profitability. Japan is the only economy among all high-income OECD economies that still does not have legislation on sexual harassment in employment and does not establish criminal penalties or civil remedies for sexual harassment in employment. Globally, 43 economies still lack legislation granting protections to women from sexual harassment in employment. And in 51 economies, even though there is a sexual harassment legislation, it does not provide criminal penalties or civil remedies for victims. The last high-income OECD economy to pass a reform to ensure legal protection against sexual harassment in employment was the United Kingdom in 2011. A good practice example from the region is Slovenia, which defines sexual harassment under the Employment Relations Act, as you can see on the screen. Another good practice example is Portugal, where the labor code mandates the practice of harassment is prohibited, and sexual harassment is defined as unwanted sexual behavior in a verbal, nonverbal, or physical form. Let's move on to our next indicator, which is pay. The pay indicator measures laws affecting occupational segregation and the gender wage gap. Restrictions on certain jobs have been found to be negatively correlated with male employment. This indicator has 4 components that assess whether the law mandates equal remuneration for work of equal value, whether women can work the same night hours as men, whether women can work in jobs deemed dangerous in the same way as men, and whether women can work in the same industries as men. Today, in 65 economies globally, women cannot work in the same industries as men. These are jobs in transport, manufacturing, construction, water, energy, mining. After the removal of such prohibitions, it may take many more years for women to enter an industry and reach levels of leadership and management. So, as we saw in the case of Almagul, restrictions on women's employment can have real consequences for their earning potential. In countries with labor restrictions, fewer women work and the gender pay gap is likely to be larger. Japan has a score of 25 in this indicator, and we observe areas for improvement in equal pay and job restrictions. Let's take a closer look at equal pay and see some regional best practices that Japan can refer to. And here I bring a few legal examples of language from the region. What does equal pay for work of equal value mean? This standard originates from the ILO Equal Pay Convention and provides a broader framework than equal pay for work of equal value, since it allows a comparison not only between the same or similar jobs, but also between different jobs of equal value. It also means that equality will be evaluated at a higher level than just salary. Remuneration includes salary, but also all other benefits. So there are two parts of the principle: equal remuneration and work of equal value. The good practice is to have the two specific languages without narrowing the scope of the principle. And we can see French legislation specifically addresses these two principles. However, we don't observe these two requirements in the legislation in Japan. Our next indicator is marriage. This indicator assesses legal constraints related to marriage. We look at if the law requires wives to obey their husbands, whether women can be head of household in the same way as men, whether women can obtain a divorce and remarry in the same way as men, and whether there is a legislation specifically addressing domestic violence. Japan scores 80 in this indicator. According to the civil code, a woman has to wait 6 months to remarry if she is pregnant at the time of divorce. Globally, 68 economies still restrict women's ability to remarry, and 3 of them are in the high-income OECD region. Thank you for your attention, and let me stop here and hand it over to my colleague Liang to continue with the presentation.
All right, great. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Thanks, Victoria. And the next indicator is the parenthood indicator that measures laws affecting the ability of new parents to take time off work and whether pregnant women are protected against dismissal during pregnancy. And our research reveals that in 41 out of the 190 economies covered by WBL, women can be fired just because they're pregnant. And this indicator also covers the provision of family leave benefits. And these are important areas to measure because studies have found that paid leave, whether through maternity, paternity, or parental leave, may encourage a more equitable distribution of household responsibilities between parents, which can increase women's labor force participation. And in a working paper published several months ago, my colleague and I also analyzed the correlations between relative leave allocation and women's labor force participation. And we find that where the gap between leave days for the mother and for the father is greater, women's participation in the labor market may be lower. And in the past year, 7 economies reformed on the parenthood indicator. And among them, 6 economies introduced reforms on family leave policies. You can see from the map that Costa Rica, Malawi, and Mongolia introduced paid paternity leave. And China, Malta, and the Netherlands introduced paid parental leave. And in addition to the 6 reforms, Senegal also prohibited the dismissal of pregnant workers since last year. Japan has a perfect score for this indicator. Employers in Japan cannot dismiss or give unfavorable treatment to women workers because of pregnancy or childbirth. And mothers and fathers are each entitled to more than a year of paid leave. However, despite the law, men are still reluctant to take leave and are worried about, for example, their promotion prospects. Recent news reported the government's efforts to change this, and with the Prime Minister pledged to increase the male workers' uptake of paternity leave from the current only 14% to 50% by 2025, and eventually 85% by 2030. This is a very, very good news, although it's also very interesting to see how the change is going to be in the coming years. Now let's move to the entrepreneurship indicator. And Japan scored 75 in the past year and still does not have the law that prohibit gender discrimination in access to credit. And here are two good examples in OECD that protect women from being discriminated. As you can see, both of their legislation prohibits discrimination in access to credit based on gender. OECD high-income economies may already have high levels of financial inclusion, but this is not the case globally. And our team recently published a brief in partnership with CGAP on how national financial inclusion strategies can support women. We draw on research that shows financial inclusion is the key enabler of women's entrepreneurship, but that persistent gender-based barrier remain. These include unequal access to financial accounts, constrained credit, and normative roles that keep women in the role of primary caregivers. Unfortunately, national financial inclusion strategies you can see on the screen is NFIS. It can spur reforms in support of women's entrepreneurship. And an increasing number of strategies are highlighting the need to promote women's financial inclusion. However, the strategies could do even more to promote access to credit for women and to enhance the national level collection and analysis of sex disaggregated financial data. Now let's move to the next indicator, assets. The graph shows the trends of WBL scores on the indicator level in the past 53 years. And the red dotted line represents assets. Although Japan scores 4 points at this indicator, assets is still one of the indicators where we see least score increase over the past 53 years. It is less than 18 points, only second to the mobility indicator. If you remember, mobility is the first indicator, and it has the lowest reforms, partly because it showed the highest level of equality at an aggregate level in 1970. So it has the least room to improve among the 8 areas of measurement. And the slow pace of change of asset indicator may stem from the difficulty of reforming laws governing property ownership and inheritance, especially when ingrained social norms dictate inheritance rules. Even when new legislation is passed, implementation is often hindered by social norms and women's lack of awareness of their rights. And the next is our last indicator that we measure, pension. Japan also scores 100 in this indicator, though globally 63 economies set different ages for men and women to retire and receive their full pension benefits. And the pension gap is 4 years on average. You can see from the graph that in every region of the world, the gap exists. And the gap ranges approximately from 7 months, as you can see in Lithuania, up to 10 years as in China. And however, the average gap in retirement ages for men and women is narrowing over time as schemes to increase and equalize retirement ages gradually approach their completion in many countries. And in Japan, both men and women can retire and receive full pension benefits at the age of 65. and they can receive partial pension benefits at the age of 60. Before we dive into the finding on the historical reforms, I would like to do a quick poll with you. The question is, with the current pace of reforms, with what you understand and what we covered previously, how many years would you think it will take to achieve legal gender equality globally? You can scan this QR code. I don't know if we have a chat to put in the link. And we'll give you about 30 minutes to answer and see how good or bad we go. Honestly, I haven't seen anyone chose the right answer yet. Okay, now I see. All right, I think I'll just go ahead. Congrats for those of you who selected the third one, at least 50 years. It is the correct one. And in many countries, a woman entering the workforce today will retire before getting the same right as men, as Victoria also mentioned earlier. And in the areas measured in our report, it will take over 1,500 reforms to reach the substantial legal gender equality around the world. Okay, now let's take a closer look at the 53 years of reforms and with a focus on Japan. This year, our report includes new analysis on 53 years of data on legal reforms around the world. Gender disparities persist at the regional levels, and today, equality on economic opportunity across genders is the highest in OECD high-income economies, where the average score in the WBL index is 95.3, and the lowest in MENA region, where the average score is 53.2. And OECD high-income economies have reached today's score through continual reform efforts over decades. In 1970, women in these economies faced multiple legal barriers, reflected by a rather low average score of 55.2 in 1970. By implementing 490 reforms over the past 5 decades, OECD high-income economies increased their score by 40% until today's. Within OECD, Spain is the region's top reforming economy, implementing 23 reforms between the 53 years. This is followed by Austria, almost say Australia, Austria, Luxembourg, and Portugal, each with 21 reforms. And here we can see the progress made by Japan over the past 53 years. As you can see, Japan enacted 6 reforms throughout the years and went from an average score of 62.5 to 78.8. However, its pace is rather slow among the OECD high-income economies, and we've highlighted throughout this presentation that there is still work to be done to make sure that Japanese women have the same opportunity as men, both at home, at work, and as entrepreneurs. For our analysis of our historical data this year, we summarize 5 important takeaways, and this page has 3, and we're going to talk more in the next one. The first one is, since 1970, the global average women business in the law score has improved by about 2/3. It rose from 45.8 to 77.1 points due to more than 2,000 reforms. And in the OECD high-income region, as we mentioned earlier, the average score improved by 72.5% or 40 points due to those almost 500 reforms. And second, the progress is uneven, and only 14 economies out of the 190 have laws giving women the same rights as men. And all of the 14 economies are in the OECD high-income region. And the third takeaway is it is not only who reformed that's uneven, but also what they reformed. Over the past years, we have observed most reforms related to prohibiting domestic violence, gender discrimination in employment, and sexual harassment. However, other areas have been really slow to reform, like inheritance rights. And most reforms in our OECD region have been following this trend. The most are in workplace and parenthood indicators, and the least in mobility and assets indicators. From the left panel, it is the number of reforms took place by decade and region, and there are also regional differences. There are regional differences in the timing of the reform efforts. You can see from the graph. Many economies in Latin America and the Caribbean began their reform process in the 1970s, reaching their peak in the 1990s when the region enacted 107 reforms. And by contrast, most other regions actually reached their reform peak in the 2000s. Sub-Saharan Africa with 169 reforms, OECD high-income economies with 143 reforms at the time, and ECA region with 109 reforms. The right panel showcases the pace of reforms in the OECD high-income economies, as we just mentioned. And we're back to the takeaways. The main takeaways. The first takeaway is that economies with a historically larger legal gender gaps have been catching up, especially since 2000. Analysis of the annual growth rate in the Women, Business and Law Index shows that faster progress is being made in economies that had a historically lower level of gender equality. And economies have the highest growth rate in WBL scoring OECD include Luxembourg, New Zealand, and Iceland. And two of them already achieved full point in an index. And the last point is the catch-up effort effects have been happening across all areas covered by women, business, and the law, but the pace of the progress has been uneven. The catch-up effect has been strongest in the laws affecting women's decisions to enter and remain in the labor force, following by those affecting women's work after the birth of the child, their ability to start and operate a business, and the right to receive equal pay. However, economies have not made the same progress in closing the gender gap in laws related to agency and freedom of movement, as we also mentioned earlier, property and inheritance rights, and economic security in retirement. To understand better what drives reform and what role data can play, our team worked with civil society organizations, the public and private sectors, and international organizations to conduct case studies of 7 countries that enacted legal reforms to improve gender equality. We find that research and data have been one key element to gain support for reforms. For example, in Kenya, advocates use data on the pervasiveness and economic costs on gender-based violence during the parliamentary deliberations that led to the adoption of the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act in 2015. We also have seen women, business, and law data used by governments and World Bank operational teams to inform reforms. We saw that in Egypt, for example, in 2021, World Bank team working to enable private sector development and foster women's economic inclusion provided technical assistance to the Financial Regulatory Authority and the Central Bank of Egypt to issue circulars prohibiting gender-based discrimination in access to financial services. And in the UAE, women business and law data have been instrumental in identifying gaps in existing legislation and informing a package of comprehensive reforms toward gender equality. Now let's move on to the next and the last item in our agenda, what's next for WBL. Our team continues to expand our substantial research agenda, and recognizing the formidable challenges facing women, we are exploring several areas of research aimed at expanding the reach of the indicators. For example, we aim to publish data on new indicators measuring childcare legislation and the implementation of the law, and expand data and analysis on measures related to women's safety. This pilot dataset will be published in WBL 2024 and fully integrated in the index and report in the WBL 2025. And our website allows you to view indicator-specific and country-specific data and access primary legal sources. And we hope our 53-year panel data can provide some help to your research. And in addition, you can also read our recent blogs and case studies, which covers topics such as financial inclusion, violence against women, and women with disabilities. I would highly encourage you to scan this QR code now and visit our website to access our new report, if you haven't done that yet, and use the data to at your own work. With that, I would like to conclude our presentation and thank you for participating today. We look forward to answering questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thank you very much, Victoria and Lian, for giving a snapshot of the latest edition of the Women Business and the Law report, and also a deep dive on how Japan looked like in the latest edition, and also interesting sort of story of next steps in terms of the WBL 2024-2025. Thank you very much. In fact, I had a question about how the project is going to shed the light on the disability, but you touched upon the disability toward the end, and then this is going to be included in the future report. So it's great. Thank you very much. Let me read the question that we received from viewers. The first one. This is a question from Sasaki-san. Thank you for your question, as always. I understand that World Women Business and the Law report are published every year. How does the World Bank use it in its dialogue with developing countries in order to push them for further policy reforms? Any comment, please?
I'm glad to take this one. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone, for your attention and for asking this very interesting question. And it's indeed a good point. Women business and the law data can provide important evidence to support the design of policy interventions that promote women's economic empowerment. And increasingly, World Bank Group operations are using women business law data to inform project design and target discriminatory legal framework. So my colleague Liang has already provided 2 examples how our data was used in operations in Egypt and United Arab Emirates. And I would like to add that in Azerbaijan and Vietnam, the World Bank supported the reform of labor legislation to remove job restrictions for women as identified by women business and law data. And women business and law data are also used by other institutions to influence policy change. For example, UN Women and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And we indeed would like our data to be useful. And we have seen how our data has been extensively used in the World Bank operations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The other question is this. Occasionally, World Bank have the report, publication, the projects to give a scores to respective countries, or sometimes ranking the countries in different orders. In case of the Women, Business and the Law report, I presume that some country may have their views on the results of the report. Some country may want to intervene or put forward their own thinking and views to the team. And also, we have a variety of external experts around us, like civil society colleagues or people from the legal background or professors or academics. They may want to also have some views on the results, etc. So for the I just wanted to ask about the timeline of the report, the production, typically, and also what are the opportunities for the government to make their views to be included in the analysis in the report. What would be the opportunities for the expert, professors, the researchers to put forward their thinking and their ideas in the report? Typically, for example, in case of the World Development Report, we do have a series of consultation and workshops to hear the views from the government and also the expert and the professors, etc. So I just wanted to know, what would be the process that you have in the Women, Business and the Law project? Thank you.
I can start saying just for the cycle or the timeline of the project, because we are an annual project, and so we're always aiming to publish at the beginning of March or sometime in March before the Women's Day, and for the consultation, we actually welcome we actually doing this throughout the cycle. And we welcome all the people's comments and suggestions around the cycle as well. And Victoria, if you want to come in and talk about specifically on the government.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Leon. So I think I provided an excellent answer. I just want to do it that we invite professors, data researchers, and all interested parties to contribute to our research. Please visit our website, become our contributor. Please, we would welcome your participation by filling out our surveys and expanding our database of local experts. And as I mentioned, we currently have over 10,000 local experts in 180 economies who support our research. And we also welcome dialogue with the government. And on our website, we have a government portal open after we close our data collection for governments to submit the questions, and the team will be pleased to answer any questions and explain our methodology in detail as needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We received one more question from the Bureau in advance, which is this. I'm not an economist or I'm not a lawyer, but as a woman, I have experiences to face with the situation of the gender inequality. So I'm interested in the Women, Business and the Law project. Not limited to the mid-career economist position currently advertised as part of the DFSP program, but generally speaking, what type of expertise, like required soft skills, etc., what type of expertise are you looking for at the project? Any suggestion, advices as to women's professional career building? Now, for the particular position currently advertised on the DFSP programs, Japanese National Recruitment Programs, we encourage you to take a look at the TOR in a careful manner. But I just wanted to ask both of you, as we have, the team members from the project. So, what's the size of the project? How many of you actually are in the project? And what type of expertise that you have, like economists or lawyers or other expertise? What type of people you have and what are the size of the team? That's the one question I would like to ask. The other question is, since we have two of you from the project, would you please be able to speak a little bit about yourself? How how did you end up being a part of the Women Business and Law project? Thank you.
I can start with
Yes,
the-
absolutely, of course.
So what kind of what's the background of in the team? So it's actually a very diverse team. For example, me and Victoria have very different background. Victoria is a lawyer, and I have a background in policy and economics. And other people in the team, we have about 30 people in the team, including short-term consultants, and people are mainly selected in the lawyer and policy background, but also people with great data skills. And we also have the position that's open, I think, is economists and people with economics background as well. And Victoria, if you want to add something.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this very interesting question. So yes, to talk a little bit about ourselves. So I joined the team in December 2016, and I have worked across all women business and the law indicators. I worked on our labor, violence against women, and family research. And I'm also pleased to share that I lead our contributor management relations. And yes, to it, we have people with very different backgrounds, and we're a very diverse team. Lian, would you like to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, glad to do so. I started in 2020. I was an intern with the team, and I also work across different teams. I'm currently leading website. So I just wanted to add one more thing. You can go to our website, and at the bottom of, it's a little tiny bit hard to find, is at the bottom of the page, you can meet our team, where you can find everyone with our title and our bio there with a small picture also, and the link to the LinkedIn if you want to add us. And then, so currently I'm leading the website, and also I'm a temporary acting team leader for the labor team, because Natalia, who joined last year presenting, she's on maternity leave, just gave birth to a baby.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You responded to that question, all the questions that we received from our viewers. So thank you very much once again for your time to present the report and also the answering the questions. With us connected from Washington, we had the Victoria Kaitina and also Lian Shen, both the analysts at the Women Business and the Law project of the World Bank. Thank you very much for both of you joining us today. Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much for having us today.
Great, thank you very much. So we continue organizing the interesting seminars in the format of the morning seminars, and also we do have several more career seminars featuring Japanese national staff even this week, this evening, and also 2 sessions to be held next week. So please take advantage of those seminars. And also, lastly, I'd like to mention that please look at the Japanese National Recruitment Program's website. Please do think seriously about applying those positions. We are looking forward to working together with you in the future at our institutions. With that, I'd like to close the seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.